Casey. All right, nice to meet you all. I am Claire Matten. I'm an advisor here with Sterling CRE, and I specialize in industrial and self-storage assets. So even before the pandemic started, we had started sending up these warning flags about the lack of industrial product across the state. And Bozeman, you might have been in the stickiest situation across the U.S. when it comes to industrial availability. So I did some research, and I can't find anywhere that has the same kind of bottomed-out vacancy we're experiencing here in Gallatin County. So following the overall theme, we've seen the vacancy for industrial product decline by nearly 1.59% nationally year over year, down to 4%. At the same time, prices are rising for sales and leasing. So I want to talk about this lease rate trend in Bozeman, which again, this data encompasses both 2021 and 2022 figures. And if we just look at 2022 data, we see the number creep up even further by almost $1 per square foot. So the buildings where you're seeing lower rates in today's market typically show some signs of obsolescence. And that's anything from low clear height to overbuilt office, lack of infrastructure, meaning the building isn't serviced by municipal water to allow for an ESFR or a wet sprinkler system, or the property isn't serviced by a public wastewater treatment system designed to allow for more employees to be on site at one time. So, as we typically see here in Montana, we lag national trends a bit, and I'm here to say that I believe we're gaining steam towards a larger rent growth percentage as we enter into the end of 2022 and early 2023. So if you pay attention to the industrial sector, you probably remember a lot of panicky headlines about how industrial's dominance was about to buckle as the market saw more space being vacated, specifically all the media attention on Amazon subleasing all of their space. But we actually sat through quite a few roundtable discussions with a lot of those brokers in those larger metros. That space was absorbed as fast as it hit the market, and those vacancy rates are still hanging around 1%. So it really didn't have as much of an impact on the industrial vacancy rate as I think the media was trying to portray. So there's good news and bad news for the local industrial pipeline. So while we're seeing quite a bit more industrial development in the pipeline in 2023 and beyond, most of the speculative development is getting claimed already. If you own a piece of industrial property here in town and you want to consider speculative industrial development, we would encourage you, if possible, to include more intensive loading, such as dock high or truck wells, excess yard area for storage or parking, and smaller office footprints with at least 24-foot clear height, with trends in newer buildings gravitating towards 32-foot clear for large-scale developments. Pre-engineered steel, precast, and concrete tilt-up are the three materials typically being used today, and a flight to quality from tenants is demanding that type of product across the state. Users typically need at least 24-foot clear for racking purposes, so you start to minimize your buyer or tenant pool once you creep below that number. Mid-range footprints are becoming increasingly attractive, especially those between 8,000 and 15,000 square feet. And there's limited cold storage available, so a lot of people are starting to consider some speculative cold storage space. And that's also an area to keep an eye on, along with wet lab and R&D space from all different kinds of users. Keep site coverage or floor area ratio in mind when analyzing your site. And different intensities require different amounts of parking or consideration for truck circulation. So industrial product is clearly in high demand, but we do field questions about how the current economic conditions impact cap rates. Industrial cap rates currently, multi-tenant distribution manufacturing facilities with good credit and healthy remaining lease term are yielding cap rates somewhere around the low 6s to 6.5%. I would say about 6 to 8 months ago, we were well into the 5s, maybe even high 4s, depending on credit of some of the tenants. But the shift in the capital markets and the cost of capital has kind of started to shift that upward. Single tenant facilities, depending on the credit and lease term, are closer to mid 6s to low 7s. Again, this was down into the 5s a while ago, but we're kind of bracing for what the capital markets are doing with interest rates. So scarcity of quality investment product is contributing to the continued compressed cap rates in Montana. But like I said, as interest rates continue to rise and we deliver more industrial product, we're kind of going to see this soften a little bit. So if you're an industrial owner contemplating selling, now does still feel like a good time to maximize value. If construction costs continue to hold at all-time highs, existing buildings are pulling in a premium as they remove delivery date guesswork for end users and occupancy timelines. And as Ryan noted earlier, we're still seeing demand from buyers even as interest rates have brought some pause to the market. Okay, so we will move on from the exciting world of big metal and concrete boxes, and then we'll talk about the ever so sexy world of self-storage and what has happened in Montana in the wake of COVID. So we saw more self-storage development across all across the state, but what was interesting is that we are still not catching up with demand, and acquisitions are very hard to come by for existing facilities. So you notice that we split out Bozeman from Belgrade on this chart, and as the difference in pricing was substantial enough that they were leading to some numbers that didn't paint the whole picture, so we split them into two sections. So I want to point out a statistic that we don't have up here, and that's vacancy. For most of 2021 and 22, we saw at least 95% occupancy across almost all facilities in Belgrade and Bozeman, and some operators reported 100% occupancy with growing wait lists. So believe it or not, this means that there is an opportunity for more storage in our market. And in speaking to local operators, the idea that a unit available today will be leased by Friday is a common sentiment. So the demand meant storage rents went up across the state, including here in Bozeman. It's interesting to see that climate-controlled units didn't see the biggest jump in rent prices, with regular non-climate storage seeing bigger jumps in rates. But that's probably because Montana in general has a very small number of climate units. There's not as much demand here for that, like in other markets like Phoenix and things like that. So that's probably because, so that is the reason for when we compare the rent growth that we don't see the jump in the climate units. We've got people taking jobs ahead of finding housing here in Bozeman, and so they're looking to store items prior to finding their place of residence. And the for sale residential market has softened here in Bozeman a little bit, which leads to more need for storage and while people are combining households, which in turn keeps consistent demand there for storage. So transactions are still occurring, but most of them are off market. Legacy storage owners who want to avoid capital gains are hitting a wall when they're trying to find alternative replacement properties which cash flow similarly to their existing facility. So there are so few replacement upleg properties available out there right now that it's kind of creating a little bit of a gridlock situation with our self-storage transactions. There are large deals getting done at an institutional level, but the deals that are getting done with some meat on them and some true upside are really being done with older generation, self-managed facilities with owners looking to exit the business entirely and retire. So finding a facility like this can be tricky, and once you do, you better believe that they've been called 3 times already that week and wondering if they'd look at an offer. So the point is, deals are out there, but they're harder to find in 2021 and 2022, and the returns were skinny. On the flip side, if you're an owner, you have no shortage of buyers calling, and it sounds cheesy, but if you're serious about selling, bring the facility to market. The reason you're getting called off market is because they don't want to compete with other buyers. So bring your facility to market with an experienced brokerage team. We know some people. And allow yourself to vet multiple offers and gather the highest and most qualified buyers that you can. Cap rates are pushing up slightly as we see interest rates change, but the market is still very, very competitive, and we encourage owners not to leave anything on the table.